and thanks so much for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Michelle Beck. Let's get to your headlines. A look at the markets this morning as the world reacts to President Trump pausing new tariffs on nearly all of America's trading partners. While the president temporarily halted these so-called reciprocal tariffs, giving time to negotiate, he increased taxes on imported goods from China. This escalates the trade war with the world's second largest economy. And overnight, China raising its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods to 84%. Meanwhile, tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the U.S. are now sitting at 125%. NBC's Alice Barr has the latest from Washington.
Hi there. President Trump had been adamant that these tariffs were here to stay, so the about-face came as a surprise, a welcome one on Wall Street after weeks of turmoil. But the escalating trade war with China still spells higher prices for many of the goods U.S. consumers count on. A mass exhale and surging stocks on Wall Street as President Trump suddenly reversed course, announcing a 90-day pause in his punishing tariffs on 75 countries that reached out to negotiate.
You have to be able to show a little flexibility.
The president, though, keeping new baseline 10% tariffs in place, along with previous tariff rounds, including on Mexico and Canada. But all eyes are on the deepening rift with China. President Trump hiking tariffs on Chinese imports even more to 125% after China's retaliatory taxes on U.S. goods jumped to 84%, taking effect overnight.
China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it.
The U.S.-China trade relationship is huge, and a sustained trade war could mean higher prices in the U.S. on everything from apparel and electronics to fireworks.
That price has to go somewhere.
And Tonka toy trucks.
The harm that's being caused is really catastrophic, and please make a deal quickly.
As the president negotiates with other countries, administration officials insist the stock market plunges of recent days did not prompt his tariff reversal.
Absolutely not. The tariff plan for the president, look, he's trying to fix the fundamental trade imbalances that have been going on for this country for 35 years.
While Democrats and even some Republicans say the Wall Street chaos sends a clear message.
It's not just me that thinks the tariffs are bad for the economy.
Urging the White House to make a plan in the next 90 days. President Trump says he'll be focused on reaching individual fair deals with U.S. trading partners. One sign of progress, the new Prime Minister of Canada, where ties have been seriously strained, saying he'll start negotiating with President Trump immediately on a new economic and security relationship. In Washington, I'm Alice Barr. Back to you.
The tariff turnaround and the constant back and forth have led to a drop in consumer confidence. That's according to the local vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis.
Couple of measure of spending for January, February that were a little bit on the weaker side that many expected.
Now, meanwhile, this morning, small businesses in the Twin Cities are bracing for the changes ahead with the U.S. increasing tariffs on China. Every year around this time, Kitty Wampus Toy Store begins buying inventory for the holiday season. But for the first time ever, the owner says the holiday catalog they buy from has no prices. That's because of the constant state of flux due to these tariffs. She's considering buying more inventory from other countries, but nearly 80% of toys sold in the U.S. are made in China, making this easier said than done.
It's not like we can say, oh, we're just not going to buy from one country. We'll pivot to another country, especially when that country is China, which produces so many of our inventory products.
She adds they can absorb some of the additional costs from these tariffs, but of course not 125%. Minnesota just launched a dashboard where you can track federal cuts and their impact in the state. You can find it on the state's website for Minnesota Management and Budget. State agencies will report any disruptions or cancellations like grants to track avian flu or money for heating assistance. They've already reported more than $296 million in canceled federal funding. New data will post every weekday. Now, this comes as we learned the federal government also pulled nearly $2 million of COVID immunization funds from the Minneapolis Health Department. Jennifer Hoff talked with workers about the services that had to stop immediately.
grab your food, grab your seat. We are going to get started.
There weren't any capes in this crowd.
You all should get recognized more.
There were certainly still heroes whose work for Minneapolis Public Health was recognized at an award ceremony. At the same time, federal support for the agency was just eliminated by as much as $1.8 million.
It was a shock.
A shocking decision for leaders in charge of free vaccination clinics in underserved communities, forced to close all 87 of them immediately.
We're reeling a little bit, and we are trying to now go back and figure out how to still do some planning and how can we maintain.
The clinics provided more than 2,000 shots last year, in part for COVID-19 and the flu, as well as immunization series for Mpox and measles, when officials say only 70% of the city's 6-year-olds are up to date, 25% less than the target goal, and as outbreaks continue across the country.
To know that there are children out there that could potentially not have resources to be protected from certain things is very emotional and very devastating.
The Trump administration defends the decision, saying the pandemic is over and will instead prioritize funding projects to address other chronic diseases.
I take issue with saying COVID is over and therefore this money is not needed anymore because, one, COVID isn't over, and two, there were a lot of fallouts from COVID that we still need to be addressing.
Well, so to be clear, all of this funding would have expired by next March, but the abrupt decision is leaving people in limbo, especially when they weren't notified their work was anything but satisfactory. And now Democratic attorneys general in 23 states have filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When you head home from work today, several rallies and protests will get underway. In uptown Minneapolis, grocery store workers will gather for another protest at Kowalski's. In the last 24 hours, union members with UFCW 663 had a bargaining session with their employers. In a video update, they said since yesterday morning's meeting, they haven't heard anything and are still waiting on a new contract deal.
We're waiting still. Hopefully they give us something, but honestly, what the heck is going on?
The workers have been working without contracts since early last month. Among their demands are more money and affordable health care. And at 4 p.m., a rally will be happening at the main post office in downtown Minneapolis. The Indivisible Twin Cities organization and its supporters are leading that rally. They say they are standing up to defend post offices and fighting the Trump administration's plans to cut costs and modernize delivery. An hour later, members of the Walker Art Center Workers Union will rally at the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden to highlight the need for what they call fair treatment and safe working conditions. This comes after recent layoffs and what the union calls attacks on worker dignity and safety. New this morning, a LA ballerina is on her way back home after being freed from Russia. Ksenia Karelina has been in prison in Russia for over a year after being arrested earlier last year. She was found guilty on treason for donating money to a U.S.-based charity providing humanitarian aid to Ukraine and sentenced to 12 years in prison in August. She's part of a prisoner swap with U.S.-Russian citizen Arthur Petrov, who was arrested in 2023 for allegedly exporting sensitive electronics. Now to a developing story we're tracking right now out of Eden Prairie. A preschool teacher is on leave this morning accused of giving her students melatonin before nap time. Audrey Russo is outside Hardin Spanish Immersion Academy with more.
Eden Prairie police tell us that they're still investigating the situation. There's no criminal charges filed as of this moment. But we got a hold of the search warrant from Eden Prairie police, and it paints two very different pictures. There's what the employee told police, and there's what the preschoolers told their parents. Police were called to Hardin Spanish Immersion Academy at the end of last month. According to the warrant, parents said their kids were given bluish purple gummies with a white sugar coating by a female employee before nap time. The kids said they were instructed by the employee not to tell anyone. Parents said their kids were sleepier than normal after this. Now, the employee told police that these were Welch's fruit snacks with no melatonin. We're not naming the employee involved because, again, there are no criminal charges filed at this point. But we did reach out to the school, and a spokesperson tells us that this employee is now on leave. They say that student safety is their biggest priority. And they actually tell us that they've launched an internal investigation, and they've also reported the incident to the Department of Health. Back to you.
Happening right now, police in St. Paul are asking for your help to find the person who drove onto a crowded soccer field full of players and spectators. You can see it here, the whole thing caught on camera. Police say it all happened on McMurray Fields on the south side of Como Park. They say they found out on Sunday about the video on TikTok. They officially began their investigation in the last 24 hours. Do stick with us. More news and weather is coming up after the break.